Here we are going to talk about the web service type in terms of the REST. So earlier we talked about more traditional web service type, which is the SOAP, and here is a more, you can say, more modern and also more commonly used service type nowadays, and which is called REST. And so the REST full name is the representational state transfer. And sometimes people will just code that if a web service is following the REST style, so it's following this REST style of the web service, then we will call it RESTful web service. There's another term that is also usually heard is called RESTful web service. So you can call it REST web service or RESTful web service. Okay, so it's actually different from the SOAP style, though. SOAP is now W3C, the World Web Consortium standard. But however, the REST is not a standard. REST is not a standard. But it's basically a style that people like to use nowadays in the modern age. So basically, the REST it was introduced by Roy Fielding in 2000s, and actually the Roy Fielding actually defines a set of principles or requirements, and that is basically like to define how a web service should serve the resources. So basically, how the resources are defined and how to address to those resources. And usually, people are using structured format for the RESTful web service, and JSON and XML are the popular ones. But however, usually, you can say 90%, more than 90% of the web services they are using JSON or the even lighter data format, and XML is getting like less and less usage nowadays. And the other thing that separates or defines the REST or RESTful service from the SOAP is that the RESTful web services they transmit data over the HTTP directly and without any additional layers like what the SOAP XML does. So if you still remember, SOAP actually has the SOAP XML, and then inside the XML you have your actual content. But however, the RESTful service, the content, or you can say the data that the user needs, is directly transferred over the HTTP. So here is a very easy example, having the same example with the SOAP example. So we have the client and server, and then the client can send a request to the server, and the request is actually very easy. So without having any, you can say the additional layer. The RESTful, one of the requirements for the REST is that it follows the HTTP action semantic, which means that if the client sends the HTTP GET, then that means the client wants to read something from the service. So as you can see, the client sent the HTTP GET request to the www.exampleimdb.com, and the resource path is /stars/3. So from the previous example that we can see, we can say that there are stars resources in the example imdb.com, and in the previous example we need to send a query, a SOAP query or a SOAP operation, which is the get star info with the input of the star ID 3. But however, in the REST, actually, we can directly treat the stars as in, you can say, as a collection of resources, and then we want, and one of the way to access the resources in the stars collection is to just use, for example, slash and with the resource ID, for example, like 3. And sometimes you will see people use, you can say, brace to encompass the ID for to encompass the ID follow or after the collection name. For example, stars, brass, 3 brass, and then that also can help us to indicate the star ID 3, the ID 3 of the stars. So that is also one way, one of the way that is commonly seen nowadays as well. So when the server receives these requests, then it can understand that the client wants to get or wants to read the one of the star information and with the star ID 3. So the server will prepare the response and transmit back to the client. And so as you can see, it will be like 200 OK. And then the content actually is very straightforward. It just directly give the client the corresponding data. So as you can see from this example, the data is the star. So it's follow the XML format, and then we have the star over here, and the star contains multiple attributes. One is the last name, and the other one is the first name, and is the Scarlett Johansson. And correspondingly, the content type is the like any like common XML, and with the char set UTF-8. So as you can see, compared to the SOAP, you can say request and response, the RESTful web service it actually directly sends the data back to the client without having an additional layer of the SOAP XML. So the whole document over here is lighter than the SOAP services. So to give you guys a more, you can say, deeper introduction or a more complete introduction to the REST, the Roy Filterling actually defined 6 constraints of the REST. And the reason that we are like slightly digging into the detail is because nowadays, still currently, REST is still one of the most popular and most widely used style for the web services. So yeah, that's the reason. And then these 6 constraints are are listed over here, and we are going to introduce them one by one. But later on, you will see that some of them, they are quite similar to the requirement of the original design of the HTTP. So, well, later on, we will see, the details. So first of all, the first constraint is the client and server. So RESTful services, it follows the client and server architecture, similar to like most of the web application. So it's actually independent. It can help us to have independent development of the client and server logic. So, and stateless is that each of the requests should contain all the necessary information for the service to understand. So when you are sending a request to the from the client to the service, you need to give all the information that is required to define that request. So, for example, you cannot send a request to say I need a response from the previous request. So it's not the type of request that RESTful service supports. And actually, HTTP is not. It also not encourage people to do that and to define or design their services like that. So these stateless characteristics is actually quite important because in this case, a service, it does not need to remember any previous request. So when a request has been processed, and then the service can forget about that request directly, so that it can reduce the loading of the to a service. So as you can see, both of these two requirements, they are quite similar to the HTTP design. And the next one is the cacheable. About the cacheable. So the responses it could be labeled as cacheable or non-cacheable. So cache is actually one of the mechanism that can help us to have a more efficient data loading procedure. So you could implement cache to directly access the data that has been prepared. But however, some of the data may be cacheable and some of data that may not be cacheable, and the rest actually allow you to label the response as cacheable or non-cacheable. And the next thing is about layered system. So which means that a RESTful service, it can have additional layers to improve the system scalability. So when you face you can say a scalability issue from the data, the large amount of data or a large amount of users, then in this case, to use multiple, you can say hardware resources to help you to lower down the burden of the single machine, then it's a quite preferable and also quite popular solution for the scalability issue. And RESTful service it allows you to improve the scalability by having like multiple layers of the architecture. And so these allow the individual layers to be developed independently as well. So, and the next constraint is a little bit, you can say, special. So this constraint is called code on demand, and this constraint is optional as well. So basically, it allows a client to execute some certain procedure or some certain algorithm, and the client can can send those procedure to the services in the form of applet or script, and the logic, this type of like procedure or logic can be used to dynamically extend the functionality of the client. So basically, that's the code on demand constraint. And the next constraint, you can say, could be one of the most important constraint, which is one of the most important and one of the most distinguished feature to the RESTful services. So, which means that when you see the service follow this like design, then like you can say 90% of the chance it's most likely a RESTful service. So this constraint is called the uniform interface of REST, or the uniform resource interface of REST. And well, as you can see from this term, most of the web service style is actually about the interface, and the uniform interface of REST it defines a certain general, but you can say comprehensive enough style for most of the services. And for this one, actually, we have four things or four parts that we can introduce. The first one is the resource identification through URI, and let's take a look. So the resource identification through URIs means that in terms of the REST, everything, all the resources all the information is a resource. Everything is a resource to a RESTful service, and and every resource has a URL or URI to define or to address these resource. And the URI can be organized in a hierarchical way that is intuitive and easy to understand. So, like I said, everything in the RESTful service is a resource, and each of the resource should have a URI. And just for example, if right now we have a university like RESTful service, and then we organize or maintain the NCU the data in the RESTful service. then what you can do is we can have the example.com, www.example.com as the service location. And we can slash NCU, and then NCU is a resource, and the outcome, the response could be, for example, the full name for the NCU, and also some history story of NCU, and what's the current current number of departments, and so some explanation to NCU will be explained over here. So you are getting, if you send the HTTP GET to read this URI, then you'll get the resource of the NCU. And then there are other resources inside the NCU. For example, we can have different departments, different staff, and right now one of the resources could be the CSRSR, the Center for Space and Remote Sensing Research. Then in this case, we can just use the slash to have the additional, the next level point of view. So from the NCU to one of the department, one of the center, and then in this case, this address over here indicates that we can get the information for the CSRSR. And inside CSRSR, there are a lot of resources as well. For example, we could have the rooms inside the CSRSR, and then you can get a collection of the rooms, and maybe some information about each of the room, like the ID of the room, and then how many seats in that room, and whether it has the projector or not, or and how many whiteboard it has. So those could be the information that you could have. But well, if you want to like direct or adjust to one specific room, then of course one way to do it is also by using slash. So for example, from the rooms, and then you want to go to one of the specific room, for example, like the R3114, then in this case you can also design a RESTful service like this. So and that's, as you can see, this is an example to these you can say characteristics, or to this feature of the RESTful services. So everything is a resource, and then all the resources they have each individual like identifier, the unique resource identifier, uniform resource identifier. And the URIs, those resources can be organized in a hierarchical way. Okay, the next one is the resource manipulation through the HTTP verbs. This one is quite easy to understand, and we have mentioned it multiple times in the past. So basically, like I said, REST is actually follow the HTTP HTTP action design or action semantics. So we have the commonly known the management transaction, which are the CRUD, the create, read, update, and delete. And the RESTful services, they follow the HTTP design to have the corresponding HTTP method for each of the semantic. So HTTP post is for the create, HTTP get is for the read, HTTP put is for the update, HTTP delete is for the delete. So, and the next thing is about the self-descriptive representation. And so basically it also talks about some of the design that from the HTTP as well. So for example, like each request and response transaction is stateless, and each request should contain all the necessary information to finish an operation. And these stateless characteristics actually has some benefits. For example, like you can transfer the stateless request to other servers or other services to help you to achieve the load balancing, and also maybe the error recovery as well. And in this case, if if it's stateless, then caching can also be supported based on this constraint as well. So basically, the self-descriptive representation means that everything is stateless, and you need to contain all the necessary information in your request or response. Okay, and then the next part is the hypermedia as the engine of application state. It's not so easy to understand, but however, it actually you can say this requirement over here actually defines the style of the REST. So when you see this type of style, then you can say it's most likely a RESTful service. So basically, as we mentioned earlier, that for RESTful service, everything is a resource, and then everything has an URI. So in this case, a client can interact with a RESTful service entirely through the hyperlinks. Entirely through the hyperlinks. So earlier we see the example of to linking from NCU to CSRSR to the rooms in the CSRSR and to the R3114 in the rooms of the CSRSR. So everything can be achieved entirely through the hyperlink. So it's very intuitive and straightforward. And like I mentioned earlier, so RESTful service should include the hyperlinks to the linked resources and possible actions. So, for example, like when the RESTful service send back the NCU information, then you can also include the hyperlinks to that the NCU resource has. For example, you can have the hyperlink to each of the departments, and then by clicking on those departments, then you can retrieve the information of that department. And here is one example, like the one that we have earlier. So when we retrieve the stars with the star ID 3, then we can retrieve this lady, the Scarlett Johansson. When we retrieve the information of this Scarlett Johansson, then maybe we can also have a hyperlink linking from this resource, this number 3, this like ID 3 stars to, for example, like the films from this star. So we could have something like star 3 and then slash films slash 46. All right. So basically, we are linking from the star ID 3 to her films, and then inside her films, one of that is and you can indicate to one of the specific film. And for example, like this one could be like Lucy, one of you can say a little bit old movie though, but however the reason I choose it is because it was shot in Taiwan. And so you can link from one resource to another resource by using the hyperlinks, right? By using the hyperlinks like this. And from this film, actually, we can link to, for example, the cast for this film. And then we can have something like this, for the film 46, and then slash cast and slash 2. And then we can get the like another star, for example, like the Morgan Freeman, like this. So so basically what I'm trying to do is to use this example to explain that for the RESTful service, you can link from one resource and use the hyperlink to link to other resources and the other resources, and so on and so forth. So this when you see a web service provide the functionality similar to this, then most likely it's a RESTful service. So basically, and the other, so this is kind of like the distinguish characteristics to the RESTful service. And in this case, you can say all the like resources in the all the resources in the RESTful services is actually treated as one of the entity, or one of the one of the entity, and then that entity could have relationships with other entities. And commonly, usually we will use classes to indicate that. But however, if you want to establish specific relationships between the entity level, then it can be done as well. So basically, it will become the hyperlinks into a graph. That by connecting those resources with the hyperlinks, then finally we have a graph. And this Star Wars graph, the Star Wars character relationship graph, is totally just an example. It's totally just an example to indicate what's the meaning of a graph. Okay. All right, and then finally, let's briefly compare the SOAP, SOAP and REST. These two like popular types of the web service types. So if you treat, and this is one of the kind of like one of the best example that I can find. This is very intuitive, actually. So both REST and SOAP, they are built on top of the HTTP. So let's just say the horse right here is the HTTP, and for the REST, actually, and right now the content that we want to transmit, let's just say the human, the human the human is the content that we want to transmit from one point to another point. So for the REST, it's kind of like you can directly put the data on top of the HTTP and directly transmit it. And so as you can see, it's pretty lightweight in this case. And on the other hand, if it's a SOAP style or SOAP standard, then in this case, it's kind of like you need to have the car over here, and it's kind of like an additional level, like the SOAP XML. It's pretty structured. Don't get me wrong, it's pretty structured, and the data that you want to transmit, the human, is inside this inside this card. Then in this case, you can still transmit this data, but however, it provides a more structured but however also more weight to the transmission. So in this case, by comparing the REST and SOAP, these two graphs actually indicates that most of the time SOAP is heavier than the REST, and then in this case, SOAP is usually slower than the REST as well. And that's also why nowadays REST is one of the most popular style of the web services, if not the most popular one nowadays. So this is kind of like you can say how popular the REST and SOAP are, of course, from 2005 to 2011. And as you can see, the growth of the REST is like very fast. And at that time, actually, even till like 2011, I actually don't think most people understand like what REST exactly is, and a lot of different types of REST was proposed. But however, I think right nowadays REST has become it's kind of converged already, and people when you talk about REST, people have this a certain image in their mind, and they pretty much know what type of REST, what type of service that you are referring to. And so I hope that you guys know what REST is, because even till nowadays, it's still one of the most popular type of the web service. And if in the future you after you graduate and then you have a job outside, then kind of like most likely if you become a software developer, especially the web programmer, then like it's kind of like guarantee you need to know what REST is, and maybe you need to know how to communicate with the RESTful service, or even you need to know how to build a RESTful service.